Bueno, ahí coloco el segundo, tercero y cuarto video, si me sale todo bien.
Within Shambhala, there was a big emphasis on the arts and on arts that arise from kind of an open mind and an open heart. So not arts that's like a kind of personal expression. The emphasis was more on the sense of real openness that could come from non-aggression and could come from be a way of cultivating one's own wisdom and one's own compassion in the world. So we're trained like that. I was trained in that way. And I was also trained in 7th century Japanese court dance since 1976. And this is, a form, an art form, music and dance, which was specifically within Shambhala, big emphasis on the arts and on arts that arise from kind of an open mind and an open heart. So not arts that's like a kind of personal expression. The emphasis was more on the sense of real openness that could come from non-aggression and could come from be a way of cultivating one's own wisdom and one's own compassion in the world. So we're trained like that. I was trained in that way. And I was also trained in 7th century Japanese court dance since 1976. And this is, a form, an art form, music and dance, which was specifically, how the wisdom of that culture was transmitted. It was made to link the gods and the earth and the community and the seasons. Its actual function was to create this harmonious world. And I think many traditional arts were that way. And this was a big influence that how we move or what kind of music could attract kind of goodness or attract not only a powerfulness, but an enormous kind of sense of, it's like the best of a human being and the best of human beings together. It was an expression of that in a very, very formalized way. It's been extremely formalized for centuries. But on the one hand, the improvising and working in communities, and I did a lot of work with jazz musicians and, wild painters and poets. And I was at Naropa Institute and when Allen Ginsberg and Peter Orlovsky were there. There was just a lot of experimenting across disciplines in the arts. And I think it was a great place to be there in the 70s. And on the other hand, there's this 7th century Japanese court dance, which really I just tried to do exactly like my teacher did. And he did it exactly like his teacher did for generations. But the interesting thing was, whether you're just making stuff up with folks, or whether you're doing something that's exactly the same, hundreds of times I've done the same dances over and over. How you pay attention is exactly the same. Like you pay attention to the body, and then you pay attention to this 360-degree space out of which the gestures are arising. And it's the same. It doesn't matter whether it's always that moment. It's never happened before. So that spirit somehow connected with what you would talk about when we first, I first read about it in the book, The Social Presence in Theater. I think, oh, what's that? I wonder what that is. And then it was sometime later when you said, I've been thinking of this thing called social presence in theater. Do you think you could make that? Or something like that. you don't know what it is. But it's sort of since then, and this was a great opportunity to co-create with you and with others in the community, to co-create something that was practical, useful in just seeing very clearly what the relationships were, what is our current reality here, and how could it move without concepts, without manipulating, without the shoulds and, you know, the idea, how it could move to something that might be a little more healthy, a little bit more open, a little more, you know, not bound into concept.
I still remember when we met, and of course it's true, I had no freaking idea what social presencing theater is when I wrote about it in the book Theory U. But you know, I had I guess I saw a gap, right? The gap is that we have a lot of mindfulness practices that are applied to cultivating the interior condition of the individual. But we have a huge lack of practices that cultivate the transformation of the social field from one state of operating to another one. That's why I got interested in the creative arts. And we use a lot of these elements in the workshops, is that I believe that the gateway to creativity is actually to activate your senses, that the aesthetic dimension is probably the most underrated dimension in all leadership, in all social change. And the mystery for me really is, we know that on an individual level, the gateway to creativity is to activate your senses, to feel it, to touch it, to really get into the out of your mind and into the sensing, into the real world. But what does that mean for the social field? What does that mean? How do you activate the senses, the sensing capacity of the collective? So all of those were mysteries for me. I know there was a huge gap. I had some vague idea, but I was pretty clear that I had no freaking idea what it means. And I still remember that when we met, I was struck. Of course, by seeing your work was just opening up instantly a whole other universe of possibility. And I knew that if ever I would be blessed by us working together, you could actually take these sort of vague ideas into something real.
Might be a little more healthy, a little bit more open, a little more.
So I wonder, when you now look at the So I want. So I wonder, when you now look at the body of work that we call social presencing theater, you know, there is kind of a lot of stuff out there that, you know, also has some similarities, for example, the constellation work and related bodies of methodology. You know, what is your view on kind of some of the similarities and some of the differences? And it strikes me when you shared the three streams and also the Japanese court dance, the one thing that they all share is the practice of paying attention. So that seems to be kind of one of the underlying current of kind of the different bodies of work that you brought together. And that, of course, is also kind of the deeper phenomenon or the deeper language that underlies how we think and try to articulate the evolution of social fields. So what is your view on that? If you today look back at the 10 or so years of developing this body of work.
So I think one of the things that was so remarkable and unlocked for me personally, but for others also, the articulation in theory, you unlocked some, you know, we were able to actually say or have a framework for our experience or for the experience of the creative process. And the paying attention part was just built in to how the theory has been spoken of and practiced, and you know, it's in the soil of the theory. So I think it is important that the work we're doing. I have done some constellation work with wonderful people, mostly in Europe, and I really respect them and the work. And I think that maybe we could just note that the roots are different. That organizational constellation for many people comes from family constellations. It comes from a therapy background, which is not my background, and I'm not certain it's yours either. It's a language that's based upon a therapeutic process. Whereas I feel that my own roots, as I said, are more through meditation and performing arts, improvising, performing arts, and I think it's less. I used to say, oh, anybody can do social presencing theater. The root of the word theater is a place where something significant can be seen. And as long as there's been theater, and as far as I can tell, every culture has theater, it's a place where human beings can come together and see, you know, what it is to be a human in relationship to other human beings, you know. So I think that that's, again, what we're looking at. What is it to be a human being, and how human beings together in a healthcare system or in a education system, how we're making choices which, you know, aren't what any of us want. And we want to see what that might look like in the current situation, but our emphasis is on how it could move, how it could open up and move to something that maybe is a direction of more wisdom. So we're not so concerned about the psychology of how we got here. I used to think, oh, it doesn't take any skill to facilitate this. I'm not certain that that's exactly true. But we as facilitators don't intervene. We don't interpret the results. We don't stop and adjust people or anything like that. We just let it go from beginning current reality sculpture 1, and then it unfolds and it moves, and we encourage people to pay attention to the whole and to pay attention to how they feel, and then it ends. And then we just to hold a space for them to reflect on what happened, you know, where did I go? What did I feel like? What did I see the others doing? What inspired me to move forward? Where did I feel uncomfortable? Things like that. So they just can reflect together on their experience. And the wisdom of it comes out from their own, connecting with their own sort of body knowing and social body knowing.
Ahí entramos en la última parte ya.
You say theater is really about making visible as a community, as kind of this shared seeing and meaning making. What is the role of senses in your line of work?
I think a lot of the work that we're doing is helping people get out of living in their conceptual framework and trusting in their sense perceptions, that there's enormous wisdom there, but it's almost like, you know, what we see or how we see and hear and feel, I mean, as well as taste and smell, but is a direct experience of something. It's a direct experience of the world that we live in, but so often, very quickly, it gets wrapped up in some kind of downloading, some kind of conceptual framework. It means something, and it doesn't stay open. It's like the sense perceptions are like an opening. And there's so much direct meaning that just comes from hearing a sound or feeling something, and yet very quickly we sort of damp it down with a kind of meaning. So I think that partially what we're doing is developing more sensitivity, and the sense is more open, and we're more resonant to our sense world. But it also means that we can trust that more. We don't have to retreat quickly into like what we think about it. There's a book about the work of an American artist named Robert Irwin. And the name of this book is Seeing is Forgetting the Name of What You See. Mm-hmm. I often think that's true about feeling in terms of using the body, the eyes, the ears. Hearing is forgetting the name of, you know, by the name it already has a concept, and then it has a like or I don't like, or it's good or bad or whatever. But that just freshness of just being curious, almost beginner's mind. Oh, you know, what's this? Kind of more openness is, I think, what we're working with in the social presencing theater. And also the practice of doing that gives us more trust that that's a kind of intelligence. That's, you know, we think of intelligence as just how clever our concepts are. But in this case, it's just how resonant experience is with us. Something like that.
Sometimes you're talking about the three bodies that as human beings we can engage with. So what are the three bodies?
So part of our practice is really embodiment, feeling that we're living in this particular body. And not just floating around in our thoughts, but actually feeling that lower back and feel the legs, feel the feet on the ground. And when we do that, we start to feel more grounded and connected to this big earth body, to the Mother Earth body. So we're not floating on top of the earth like a ghost, but we actually feel like we're rooted to the earth, and the sense of contact with this earth, feeling our connection with this earth, seems like such an important part. Even so, right now, we can feel that we have a connection, our body, the earth's body, kind of vertical connection. And of course, the sense of space. But the social body could be our family, could be our team, could be the whole organization, could be a visit to the shopping mall, but we're always in social bodies. We're always moving closer or further away, or sitting up or standing down, but oftentimes we don't feel it. We don't feel the connection. And it isn't a conscious big deal thing. You know, I can be sitting in the subway car or something, and no one's thinking, oh yeah, I can tell we're in a social body. But I notice this. I notice that people are reading, some are standing, they're listening to their earbuds. But the feeling is that we're all somehow interconnected, even though we don't know one another. And no one, you know, it's not like we have to turn and say, hello, how are you? But there's a feeling of being part of a social body, of being included in a social organism. And then you leave that and you go somewhere else, and there's always this feeling that we're kind of co-creating something. So the social body then is what I think we're really trying to investigate more in our social presencing theater work. What is that sort of social fabric? And how can the shared knowing of that social fabric or social field be the source of real creativity and innovation and real compassionate action? We're making an assumption that every single being on the planet has intelligence. Every person has kindness and an ability to feel another person's kind of suffering and their joy. Every person has courage to step out of their own convenience and their own conventional way of doing stuff when called on. It's in the social fields that we work in. And how do we see it? How do we recognize that, rather than, oh, here's a problem, and oh, there's a person that's not doing the right thing, and this isn't working. But how do we actually see the potential, just the potential goodness in that situation? And let that be what expresses itself, rather than all the things that are not working, or how you wish this person were different or something, which is true, and we notice it, but we're actually functioning on another level. I just have had the very good fortune of having great teachers. And those people, I can have my complaints, oh, I've got this and this problem and blah, blah, blah. But that is not who those people see, right? They see this, perfectly good human being with great heart and great ability to help out. And they don't pay much attention to the part that, you know, it's not that it isn't painful. And we're not talking about denial here, but we are talking about recognizing that in each other and recognize that in groups and teams and, you know, bringing that part of not just individuals, but of how we see it in one another and how we actually see it in systems and in social networks, social relationships. It's there, like it's there. But so how do we bring it out is one of my questions about social presencing theater.
We are here in Berlin yesterday morning. You told me the best one-line summary I ever heard of Theory U.
It is a profound teaching, and I'm not going to do it justice, but it's a very famous teaching in the Buddhist tradition that says that when you throw a stick to a dog, the dog will chase after the stick. But when you throw a stick to a lion, the lion will turn to see who threw the stick. So there's something about chasing after perceptions, chasing after thoughts, which I think is mostly, in my experience, why I don't feel my body. It's because I'm just generating a lot of mental activity, and the habit is to follow after that, to be fascinated or horrified or whatever by whatever. And so part of the Theory U is this invitation to turn around and say, now, what is actually generating all that thought? What is all, like, who is this person? And are they just a little isolated bubble generating this and that? Or is that quite a vast, open potential of loving kindness and courage in this world? You know, like, who is that? What is that?
When you look at the dogs and the lions, right? When the way we relate to social systems, to the social field, in most social systems today is like dogs, right? We run after the sticks. We only kind of attend to the forms, kind of the outcomes. We are not attending to the sources out of which social action is being generated. And that, I remember a conversation with Francesco Varela, right? So, who also has a very close relationship with you. And when I asked him about really what mindfulness really, in his essence of the meditative and the phenomenological process, what does that really mean? It means kind of suspension, redirection, letting go. What is the essence of redirection? Moving from object to source, right? So that really is what's the journey down the year. We have practices that do that for the level of the individual, but to do that on the level of social systems, on the level of the social field, very difficult. And that's, I think, where the body of work that you have been co-creating with a number of us really is so important, because it can now, for most of us, now acting in social system as a dog is not that fun, right? So the aspiration to moving, to choosing the stance of the lion, kind of to connecting to source is there, but the skill, the practice is lacking. And I think that's really what you have been leading to co-create. And that's what we are so excited to moving into as a global community this time.
Bueno, hasta acá llegamos. Quería subir los 3 videos porque gente tenía mucha dificultad en el tema de la traducción. Seguimos el viernes. Gracias, nos vemos.